What's new in the record business? Have you brought a new sound to...
No new sound. I have a hard enough time railing over the old one. Excuse me, camera. They said, Philip, aren't you lonely in this big house? Must be very lonely.
Phil Spector, thank you very much.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you very much, Richard.
Eminem blast back into the spotlight. At a Washington, D.C. concert, over 24 fans were injured during a stampede toward the stage, and the release of his new CD has been nearly as tumultuous.
At this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
By the early 2000s, Phil Spector, by all accounts, was now a shell of his former self. Decades of alcohol and drug abuse had took a toll on him physically as well as mentally. In a strange turn of events, some would even admit they weren't surprised by he will be arrested and stand trial for murder. The last celebrity case in California had been the case of Robert Blake in 2005. Blake had been acquitted on murder charges.
Not guilty of the crime of first-degree murder of Bonnie Lee Bakley.
10 years before that, O.J. Simpson had stood trial in 1995. He too was acquitted on a double murder charge.
Not guilty of the crime of murder in violation.
And now, in 2003, Phil Spector will be the next celebrity Californian to face a jury. This is the trial of Phil Spector. February 2nd, 2003, a gunshot echoes from legendary music producer Phil Spector's Pyrenees castle. Adriana de Souza, Spector's private driver, is sat in his Mercedes outside. De Souza has not long taken the $30 an hour job. Tonight is only the 14th time he's chauffeured Spector around. He'd earlier drove both Phil and a hostess from the House of Blues named Lana Clarkson to Spector's castle. With the two in Spector's castle, de Souza is parked at the side of the house near the back door, just to the left of the picturesque fountain. There, he sits waiting, listening to the radio and eating snacks. After 2 hours, he hears a loud bang. Even over the car radio, the noise startles de Souza. His first thought is probably it's one of the branches snapping from one of the many trees on the estate. Or possibly it could be an air conditioner. Either way, he steps out of the car to investigate. De Souza walks around the fountain but sees nothing out of the ordinary, so he heads back to his car. At this moment, the back door of the castle opens and Phil Spector emerges. He's holding a black revolver. As de Souza looks closer, he can see blood on the gun. At that moment, Spector states, "I think I killed somebody." De Souza then asks, "What happened, sir?" Spector doesn't reply. The driver looks into the castle and sees the body of Lana Clarkson. De Souza then goes into a state of shock. He fears Spector will shoot him next. De Souza starts to run from the property, but then stops when he remembers he has a car parked in the drive. He jumps into the car and drives from the estate. As de Souza exits the property, he parks the Mercedes and frantically calls the police.
911, what are you reporting?
Hi, my name is Adrian. I'm Phil Spector driver. I think my boss killed somebody. Please, can you send the...
You think your boss killed somebody?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Because I'm a driver, I'm way outside and I don't know what... Okay, please send
Okay, where are you at?
Okay, and your boss's name?
It's Phil Spector.
I'm sorry?
Phil Spector.
When the police arrive, they walk up the 88 steps to the castle, 88 being the same amount of keys on a piano. As they approach, they see Spector upstairs walking back and forth. Spector walks downstairs, opens the door, and the police demand he put his arms up. He does at first, but then he puts his arms into his pockets. The police begin to shout, "Let me see your hands!" And finally, they fire a taser at him. The taser doesn't work, so they rush him and subdue Spector. As he's handcuffed, he begins rambling.
Sorry it happened. I don't know how it happened. But it happened. And I'm sorry it happened.
Spector is then taken into custody and becomes belligerent, refusing to take a breathalyzer.
I'm not drunk and I'm not stupid. Oh, dear God. Get the fuck off of me.
12 hours later, he's released on a $1 million bail. With all the press surrounding his castle, he books into the Hotel Bel Air. A few days later, he returns home. One of Phil Spector's problems, unlike Michael Jackson or O.J. Simpson, is he's unknown to the youth of the day. The wall of sound he created was now in a bygone era. His celebrity carries little weight with the court of public opinion. I will now go through a timeline of the next 4 years until the trial begins. November 20th, Phil Spector is charged with murder at the Alhambra courthouse and pleads not guilty. February 2004, Phil Spector hires Leslie Abramson. She states Spector is her idol, an icon, and the definition of cool. August 24th, Bruce Cutler, a cutthroat New Yorker best known for representing mobster John Gotti, takes over as Spector's defense counsel. September 24th, a press conference is held in which Phil Spector won't stop interrupting.
This man was tasered in his own home, thrown to the ground at the foot of the poor deceased Miss Clarkson.
Broken nose and 2 black eyes and 50,000 volts of electricity shot through me, unarmed, inviting the police into my house.
Following this, Abramson leaves and Linda Barden is brought in due to her experience in forensics. Years later, she will be the subject of a film based on the trial. The film will argue in Spector's defense, with Helen Mirren playing Linda Barden and Al Pacino playing Phil Spector. 16th of February 2005, Judge Larry Fidler agrees to let the trial be televised. He states, "It's time for LA to overcome a fear of cameras in courtrooms." He does add, should the media act irresponsibly, he will pull the plug on the arrangement. March 22nd, 2005, Phil Spector, frustrated the press won't listen to his side of the story, makes a videotape to put on his website declaring his innocence. March 19th, 2007, the trial officially begins. This time, the Ronettes are due to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Back in 1994, Spector had sent the nominee commission a letter insisting the group were not worthy of induction. The story hits the headlines. The trial begins with the prosecution's opening statements. Alan Jackson begins by introducing the jury to Spector's alleged history of violence involving guns.
Philip Spector, who when he's confronted with the right circumstances, when he's confronted with the right situation, turns sinister and deadly. Through the presentation of the evidence in this case, you're going to be introduced to the real Philip Spector.
He goes through previous allegations of the accused that involve threatening behavior with guns.
Who is Diane Ogden Halder? The evidence will show that she was a talent coordinator. She'll describe an incident back in 1982, about 6 months into their dating relationship. She'll describe how the defendant had been drinking to excess, And you'll see, as the evidence unfolds, this pattern begin to emerge. And it usually begins with the defendant drinking, and drinking to excess. He proceeded to press the barrel of the gun to various portions of her face and neck, literally driving the barrel of that steel weapon into her cheek, face. The next morning, she'll describe Philip Spector as almost a different person. She awoke, found him downstairs, and he acted like absolutely nothing had happened. She chalked it up, she'll tell you, to an anomaly. Something completely out of the blue, something completely out of the ordinary. She thought, that couldn't have been Phil Spector. That couldn't have been the man that I knew. We'll introduce you to Melissa Grosvenor. He began asking her out, and she began accepting. She'll tell you that at first he was charming enough, a nice enough guy, so they began a dating relationship. He took her out to the Beverly Hills Hotel, and they had dinner. He began drinking, drink after drink after drink. They went back to the Pasadena home. He had a pistol in his hand, his arm was outstretched, and he was driving straight for her face with the gun. She'll tell you how she recalls being awakened the next morning, being touched on the leg by Philip Spector's foot. She woke up, and she'll tell you that Philip Spector seemed to be a different person. He acted like nothing ever happened. He said, let's go to breakfast, like it was just another day. And after breakfast, Philip Spector looked at her and sort of sheepishly said something about, I guess you ready to leave now? And she said, yes, I am. You'll meet Dorothy Melvin. And she'll be honest and tell you, in her honest opinion, she thought that Phil Spector was a very charming guy. He could be very nice. In 1993, several years after they had met and during the course of their dating relationship, the defendant said, well, while you're out here, why don't you come to my Pasadena home? She took him up on the offer. Again, first time she had ever been in his home or seen his house. They began playing pool. They were having fun. They were listening to music. It was a charming night. As a matter of fact, I think the word she used was, it was a lovely night or a lovely evening. But she'll tell you that Philip Spector polished off throughout the evening almost an entire fifth of vodka or some alcohol. And at some point throughout the evening, it got late, into the wee hours of the morning, she just fell asleep on the couch. So she woke up the next morning, and she'll tell you that she looked around for Phil Spector. She couldn't find him in the living room, in the foyer area, in the kitchen. She couldn't find him. She walked out the back door, and she walks out to a very strange sight. She sees Philip Spector standing outside, broad daylight, wearing a shoulder holster, pointing a pistol at her car. He accuses her, where were you? Where were you? I couldn't find you. She said, Philip, I was asleep on the couch. How could you have missed me, for God's sake? I'm wearing a pink fuchsia jacket. Your couch is white. You couldn't have missed me. I was laying on the couch. I think you were stealing from me. I think you were doing something. The purse stays here. She says, well, I can't leave without my purse. My keys are in the purse. So he reaches into the bag, pulls out a set of keys, and throws them at her. This time, he's put away the pistol and exchanged it for a shotgun. He holds the shotgun in her face and says, I told you to get the fuck out of here. Dorothy Melvin says, Philip, the gate is closed. He said, oh, okay, I'll open the gate. But as soon as I do, then get the fuck out of here.
As Jackson talks, Phil Spector sits across from him in the courtroom and shakes his head in disagreement. During the second story, Spector becomes more distressed, and by the third, he looks bemused. Jackson goes on to talk about the prosecution's version of what happened on February 3rd. He begins with Spector's alcohol consumption that night.
Spector immediately ordered a Navy grog. He ordered Bacardi 151 straight up. He ordered at least two, plain daiquiris. And finally, at the House of Blues, the Bacardi 151. The evidence will show that Phil Spector consumed somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 separate drinks worth of alcohol that night.
He continues, Spector met Lana Clarkson on entering the House of Blues. She had first denied him entry, but was made aware of his celebrity status by a colleague.
And it was explained to her very clearly, I know you don't recognize this guy. He's Phil Spector. Treat him like you would treat Dan Aykroyd.
From that point, she went out of her way to cater to him. As they talk more, Spector asks Lana to join him for a drink. She asks permission, but her manager won't allow her.
They were having a conversation, and Phil Spector actually said, you know what, Lana, just sit down and have a drink. Philip Spector is asking me to sit down and have a drink. Am I allowed to do that? She calls a manager. The manager says, no, you're on duty. She said, Mr. Spector, I'm sorry, I can't drink with you. The evidence will show that he said, well, maybe later then.
At the end of the night, Spector invites her to his castle and she agrees to go for one drink. As the story goes on, Jackson excludes the events at the house and goes over the statement by Adriana D'Souza. He then informs the jury of how he'll be introducing witnesses and evidence that will establish the defendant's guilt. Following this, the defense begins their opening statement. Bruce Cutler starts by addressing the most damning evidence, Phil Spector's confession to his driver. Cutler begins to call D'Souza's character into question and suggests he misheard Spector.
D'Souza, a substitute driver with a language problem who was full of snacks and cookies and water and sound asleep, sitting in a closed car with the heat on and the radio on and the fountain going, could hear what Mr. Jackson claimed he heard. I think I killed somebody. I think somebody is killed. Or maybe he didn't hear anything. Because according to Mr. Jackson, the evidence will show that D'Souza asked Mr. Spector, what happened, sir? And he received a shrug.
He continues addressing the women who will be brought forward to testify against Spector.
In his way, he was a true and is a true romantic of a bygone era. He didn't chase any of these women. They came to him. They wanted to spend time with him. These were relationships that occurred between him and these women. But be assured and rest assured that these incidents to which Mr. Jackson referred go back as far as 30 years ago. Not one of these women, not one, stopped seeing Philip. Not one of these women prosecuted him. Philip was never charged once for assaulting or hurting another human being.
He also makes a few attempts at bringing Spector's musical accomplishments into the picture by any means.
This is a man whose music changed the world.
With both opening statements complete, we can deduce the prosecution will be focusing on eyewitness accounts to influence the jury's decision, and the defense will focus on scientific evidence the accused wasn't in close proximity when the gun was fired. Judge Larry Fidler on this day allows 5 women to testify about Spector brandishing guns around them between 1988 and 1995. The trial is expected to last up to 3 months. Among those reported to be preparing to act as counter witnesses for Phil Spector are Yoko Ono. The next day, the first witness, Phil Spector's former girlfriend Dorothy Melvin, testifies. She details when she met Spector and talks about their relationship.
When you first met Phil Spector, did you know before that, or did you learn that he was somehow involved in the music business, or had been in the past?
Absolutely. It's a legendary name in the music industry. The following evening, I came home from work, and there were a number of messages on my answering machine. And the first 2 were the song "Let the Four Winds Blow" in their entirety.
So what were these songs again?
It's a song called "Let the Four Winds Blow," and the lyrics are, it's embarrassing. I like the way you walk, I like the way you talk.
Is it correct or fair to say that started a dating relationship between you and Phil Spector?
It did.
Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes, I do.
And why do you recognize it?
It was taken at a Christmas party where he accompanied me That one might have been, because of the length of my hair, that might have been 93.
So about what time did you get to Phil Spector's house?
I don't know, somewhere around 8, 9, 10 o'clock.
Okay. What happened when you got to his house? What did you do?
I went in and he showed me around the living room. He has lots of memorabilia. He has John Lennon's guitar on a stand. He's got a number of wonderful, wonderful things to look at. And we just chatted, talked. He played the piano. We danced. He had music playing. We talked, he talked. And he was drinking.
When you say that the defendant, Phil Spector, was drinking, describe that for us.
I mean, the most vivid scene is him at the piano with a fifth of vodka. It was a red label, and he kept picking it up. And
During her cross-examination by Spector's attorneys, Melvin conceded that she never pressed charges and maintained contact with him for a decade afterwards. Next, Diane Ogden, former music executive, testifies Phil once threatened her with a rifle and a pistol.
It seems like, because I felt like I knew him, like he was, I felt comfortable saying yes.
And did you like him at that point?
Oh yes, I liked him. I mean, he was funny and I thought he was a gentleman.
She starts by telling the jury how she accompanied Phil to dinner and then went back to his castle.
Dinner, late evening dinner?
No, it was usually late. And sometimes I didn't know if I was going to be alone because he'd have a friend sitting there like Dennis Hopper was saying, "Hi, Philip will be here shortly, but talk to me now," So that evening, he asked me if I would like to see his home. So I followed, I took my car, and he had his driver, and I parked my car, and he had a fountain out in front, and it looked kind of like a castle, this house. It was really, really interesting looking. He had a popcorn machine, I think, and his house was full of all kinds of interesting things.
She then goes on to recall a time when he pulled a gun on her.
He had a rifle in his hand. I don't know where he went to get it. I never saw where he went to get it.
And did he say anything to you at that time?
He was screaming at me. He was screaming the F word. I couldn't even understand him. He was not my Phil. He wasn't the man I loved. I mean, I cared about this man, and it wasn't him. It was like he was demonic.
Did you ever see him again?
I did. I still cared about him, though. It's like I thought he had a problem, and it was a drinking problem, and that I thought that if he didn't drink, he wouldn't have acted that way towards me, ever.
After that, she's cross-examined by the defense. Bruce Cutler's boisterous style sees him reprimanded by Judge Larry Fiddler.
Motion to strike. You formed an opinion.
Excuse me. Excuse me, Mr. Cutler. First of all, you will not yell and point at a witness in my courtroom ever. That's number one. Number two, I was speaking, and I have told you before, when I am talking, do not talk over me. Now you may proceed.
You formed an opinion, Miss Ogden. No. You formed an opinion and a judge is guilty.
The objection is...
Just like the police, just like the media.
Mr. Cutler, I'm going to say this now for the last time. Otherwise, I will take other steps. Ladies and gentlemen, you will disregard what Mr. Cutler just said. The objection was being made. I am sustaining the objection. His remarks are irrelevant. They are stricken. You will disregard them. You may now ask your next question and lower your tone.
Yes, I will. I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Next, Stephanie Jennings testifies. She recalls her relationship with Phil Spector.
I was having a drink at the bar with a friend, and I went to the bathroom, and as I was coming out, so was Phil Spector coming out of the men's bathroom. And I tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Oh, I just took pictures of you in Philadelphia." He asked if I would join his table for a drink.
Did you, in fact, join him at his table for a drink?
Yes, I did.
All right. After the restaurant closed, did you leave Phil Spector's company at that point, or did you continue to see him throughout the evening?
We continued to his hotel.
Was that the beginning of a dating relationship?
Yes.
Did you receive any kind of an invitation from Philip Spector to attend the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremonies?
Yes, I did.
There were some notable figures at this party, correct?
Yes.
Was there any drinking going on?
Yes.
Did you see Philip Spector consume alcohol that night?
Yes.
Describe that for us.
He was drinking mainly vodka. So I don't know what the estimate would be, but I never saw him without a drink. So we started arguing, and he said, then go pay for the room. And I said, fine.
What did he say when you said you were going to leave?
That the main thing was then I would have to pay for the room. I'm not sure exactly if he slapped me or pushed me, but I ended up kind of falling backwards, like on the toilet.
And what did you do in response?
And then I jumped up and I grabbed him and I pushed him and he fell into the bathtub.
That Mr. Spector had with him when he came back into that hotel room?
It was a small gun.
And what was your reaction when Mr. Spector pulled this gun on you and sat in front of the door?
Well, I sat on the bed crying, trying to decide what to do, and he didn't seem to really be paying attention to me sitting there, and so I picked up the phone and dialed 911.
And what was his response while he had this gun in his hand?
That I was not leaving the room with my bags.
After this incident, did you have any more contact with Philip Spector, either telephonically, in person, otherwise?
Yes.
Did you, in fact, go to that Rock and Roll Hall of Fame party the following year?
Yes.
Melissa Grosvenor is next to testify. She goes through her relationship with Phil Spector.
And said that Mr. Spector was wondering if you and your sister would like to join him for dinner tonight.
Dinner, the first real dinner that you had with him, with your sister, did you start some type of dating relationship with Phil Spector?
I did. We would go to dinner. We would go to the Knick basketball games. I'd go to parties with him.
And during that period of time, did you enjoy being in his company?
I did.
Do you recall whether or not Phil Spector had any alcoholic beverages during the dinner? Did he drink?
Yes, sir. He did.
How about you?
Yes, sir.
What did you do next? Where'd you go?
We went back to his house. We went in and he fixed us a drink and he started playing music and we were dancing and having a good time. He walked in with a gun.
A gun?
Yes, sir. He walked right up to me and held the gun right to my face.
What was your reaction to this with a gun in your face, just inches away?
I was shocked. I just started crying. Well, he put the gun in the holster and then he started tapping it and then just walking back and forth, cursing and just talking wild.
At some point, did you fall asleep?
I did. Well, I was just sitting in the chair crying hysterically, and then I closed my eyes, kind of just thinking that it would, just seem like it was a nightmare, and I fell asleep. Phil tapped me on the foot, and I opened my eyes, and the first thing that I noticed was he didn't have the gun and he didn't have the holster.
You woke up. What happened next?
He said, "Would you like to go get some breakfast?" And I said, "Yes, I would." And he said, "I suppose you want to go back to New York today?" And I looked right at him and I said, "Yes, I do."
Going back to the night in question, before Phil visited the House of Blues where he met Lana Clarkson, he went out drinking with two separate women. He went to a restaurant called The Grill on the Alley with Romy Davis and another restaurant called Trader Vic's. Spector then went on to the House of Blues with the second woman named Kathy Sullivan. The first witness, Romy Davis, takes the stand and recounts the time she spent with him. She states she knew him in high school but didn't start talking to him again since seeing him at a high school reunion in 2002. They often went out to dinner. Either Phil's driver picked her up or he drove himself. Up to this week, she'd never seen him drunk. Phil, until this time, was going through a long period of sobriety. She testifies she was picked up at 7:30 p.m. and through the meal, Phil ordered 2 daiquiris while Romy had no alcoholic drink. Romy eats her meal and Phil picks at his. She remembers being concerned as she knew he took medication and was worried about the side effects of mixing the two. In total, he orders 2 drinks. Each time, she warns him, but he takes no notice. She states he was nothing like his normal self. They ordered dessert, and after the meal, Romy is driven home. During the cross-examination, the prosecution bring up the fact when interviewed by the police, she stated she had drank at the meal. Following this, the second woman, Kathy Sullivan, testifies about what she witnessed that night. She states she's known Phil since 1997. She'd first met him when dining out. On the night in question, she states she saw him and Romy Davis enter the grill on the alley at 8 p.m. At the time, she was working there as a waitress. After 10 minutes, she approached the two and greeted them. At 9 p.m, Phil asked her if she wanted to join him for drinks. When Romy was driven home, Kathy joined Phil. At 10:15 p.m, they moved on to Trader Vic's. During the meal, they are seated next to a group of 4 men who are being loud and clearly drunk. The men attempt to talk to them and it annoys Phil. When the men begin arguing with the waiter about their check, Phil and Kathy leave. While outside waiting to be picked up, the 4 men exit the restaurant. One of them begins berating Phil. Spector stares at the man angrily, not saying a word. It doesn't affect his mood and they carry on with the night. Following that, they move on to Dan Tanner's restaurant. They, at this point, both ordered a salad and more drinks. Phil again picks at his food, not finishing it. After that, they're driven to the House of Blues. It's now 2 a.m. After Kathy doesn't order another alcoholic drink, Phil has her driven home. At this juncture, things are not going well for the defence. Phil Spector believes if he can just play the jury his music, none of this will matter. He feels if they hear his music, they will know him better. Phil Spector had first found success with the song To Know Him Is To Love Him.
This is the first thing he ever did. He said, sing it like you have to a boyfriend. I said, but I don't have a boyfriend. He said, then think of your father.
He'd actually taken the lyrics from his father's gravestone. Next, Phil's driver Adriana D'Souza testifies. The driver tells the LA County Grand Jury that at about 5 a.m. on February 3rd, he heard what he described as a pop and then saw Spector leaving the house with a gun.
Does that appear approximately where you parked the Mercedes that night after you dropped Miss Clarkson and Phil Spector off?
Yes.
Is that the back door you're talking about Mr. Spector stepping out of?
Yes.
What happened when you saw Mr. Spector come out of that back door?
He was at the door. At that time, he had a gun in his hand.
What kind of gun?
It's a revolver.
Could you stand and show the jurors exactly how Mr. Spector was holding that gun?
Yes, like that.
May the record reflect the witness has stood up.
Following that, Dr. Louis Pena, the coroner who examined Lana Clarkson, takes the stand. He testifies her death was a homicide. A day later, he admits to lack of scientific evidence. The defence now admits Lana Clarkson's diary as evidence. The diary is said to contain writings on the actress's fascination with guns and her depression about her acting career. Following this, criminalist Steve Rentiera testifies that Lana Clarkson's DNA, not Phil Spector's, was found on the gun that was fired into her mouth and killed her. After this, criminalist Lynn Herold takes the stand and states the gun had been wiped of blood.
In its current condition, it does not appear to be the result of blowback or backspatter.
Okay, something or somebody came in contact with that gun after Lana Clarkson had been shot.
Yes.
At this point, defense attorney Bruce Cutler leaves for 3 weeks to film a reality TV show in which he is the judge in a small claims case. After that, former New York City police officer Vincent Tenazzo takes the stand and testifies he heard the music producer threaten women and use obscenities to describe how they deserve to die. Next, Lana Clarkson's best friend Punkin Lachlan testifies Lana was so depressed about her career she wanted to die.
She said, I don't want to live anymore. I don't want to be in this town. I want to end it. I don't want to be here anymore.
Following this, defense expert James Pex, who formerly claimed Spector was within 3 feet of Lana Clarkson when she died, now contradicts his statement and says she was at least 3 feet away. At this point in the trial, Bruce Cutler returns. Next, Clarkson's friend Gregory Sims takes the stand and says that the actress was having a hard time in the weeks before her death and had confided in him that she was unhappy about the state of her personal life, including the fact that she had no children. When Sims is asked by Deputy District Attorney Pat Dixon if Clarkson was one of the actors who would keep pursuing her career with hope and perseverance, he replies she was. Next, Richard Monasteri testifies that the 40-year-old actress was earning just $9 an hour at the House of Blues. Following this, Lana Clarkson's agent Nilly Hudson testifies. Hudson refutes claims by Clarkson's friends that she was depressed in the months leading up to her death. When asked about her thoughts on Spector, she replies, "My point of view is absolutely he is guilty." At this point, the jury visit Phil Spector's mansion in Alhambra. Lawyers and Spector are present as the jury are shown the foyer where Clarkson died. Some jurors sit in the chair where Lana Clarkson's body was found. They also see the fountain close to the parking area. The defense are currently arguing that running water may have affected what Spector's chauffeur heard Spector say when he emerged from the house holding a gun. Back in the courtroom, renowned criminalist Michael Barden testifies. He states an injury in the mouth is almost always self-inflicted. The defense, at one point, tell Phil to stand up and simulate a gun gesture with his hand. At this point, Phil Spector waives his right to testify. Following that, Bruce Cutler abruptly announces his resignation due to a difference of opinion on strategy. Following this, both teams present their closing arguments. The prosecution begins with Alan Jackson painting a picture of Phil Spector as a dangerous man. He emphasises his past behaviour threatening women with guns. He goes on to say Lana Clarkson was not in a state of depression at the time of her death, and the defence witnesses aren't credible. The defence begins with Linda Barden pointing to the evidence of blood on Lana Clarkson's wrists and hands, suggesting she was holding a gun. She mocks the prosecution's theories and cites all the forensic evidence that supports her argument. September 26th, Judge Larry Fidler declares a mistrial. Around this time, Phil Spector is interviewed for the documentary George Harrison Living in the Material World. His scenes are one of the highlights of the documentary.
I went to George's Friar Park, which he had just purchased, and he said, I have a few ditties for you to hear. It was endless. He had literally hundreds of songs, and each one was better than the rest. He had all this emotion. He had it meticulous. He was a perfectionist is not the word. Anyone can be a perfectionist. He was beyond that.
The retrial begins October 20th, 2008. This trial goes much quicker than the previous trial. Unlike the first, cameras are closed off to the media. The core arguments and evidence presented by both the prosecution and defence remain largely the same. The case goes to the jury March 26, 2009. On April 13th, Phil Spector is found guilty. On May 29th, Phil Spector is sentenced to 19 years to life. He will die in prison on the 16th of January 2001. Our lives could be looked at like a book with chapters, a TV series with episodes, or a movie with acts. Some have great beginnings with bad endings. Phil Spector's was like that. It started bad, it ended worse, but in the middle, he touched on genius. People come and go through our lives, but they only see the period they were in. It made sense Phil Spector refused visits from his former musical peers while in prison. The best years were long gone. The music was gone. In truth, he'd began to break down in the 80s. The recording sessions with the Ramones had seen him as a producer, a shell of his former self. Dee Dee Ramone had commented, "He looked like a man walking his last mile." In the trial, he'd appeared troubled, lonely, vacant. In his later years, he named 5 people, all deceased, who he stated walked into my life and left footprints on my heart. My father, my son, my beloved friend and brother John Lennon. To know him was to love him stays imprinted on his father's gravestone. For his own, he requested the words taken from the movie King Kong. They read, "He was a king in his own civilization. Now he comes here a captive for your amusement." Ladies and gentlemen, here lies Spector.
Great working with you, Phil. Really great. I worked with a lot of cats in my time. Honestly, really great. Sincerely, really great.
Thank you to everyone who supports the channel, and if you wish to donate, it would be greatly appreciated. Just click the 3 symbols next to the video, then the thanks icon, and choose however much you wish to donate. Everything donated goes directly back into the channel to make better quality videos. As always, thank you for watching and stay tuned for the next video.